All right. Hello, everyone. My name is RJ Kern. I come to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today we're going to be talking about portfolio reviews, which as a fine art photographer, I find to be a nerve-wracking experience, but also one that has changed my career path, opened a lot of doors for me, and I really am very enthusiastic to share with you some of my experiences over the years with portfolio reviews. So I have a presentation I'm going to pull up here, and it's going to be about an hour. We'll save our questions till the end. And I hope you're going to enjoy this. So the title of my talk is Portfolio Reviews, Identifying and Hitting Goals. I want to give a special thanks to B&H, photo, video, pro audio, all their great source. I actually had a package show up today from them, a big old Pelican case. Love working with them, and their event space is lots of great learning. And this is sponsored by SanDisk, so I'm very appreciative of their support to kind of share some of these things that are not taught in a photography MFA program. I work with two great galleries as well. Wanted to give them a big old shout out, the Veronique Wentz Gallery here in Minneapolis, as well as Olson Larson Galleries. And I currently work with two publishers that I really enjoy working with, MW Editions in Brooklyn, New York, as well as Care Verlag in Heidelberg, Germany. So without further ado, I'm going to give a little outline, a roadmap of what we are going to do today. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about an overview of what portfolio reviews are, what you might expect from them, how to maybe set some goals, the questions to ask when you are going to a portfolio review. Maybe it's your first portfolio review. Talk about the process of maybe selecting your reviewers, which is essentially a choose your own adventure. You get to decide whether or not you're going to meet with a gallerist, a photo editor. That makes a big difference if you're going after editorial commission work or assignment work, or if you are trying to sell prints via an exhibition at a gallery, or trying to get your work exhibited more on the mainstream gallery circuit. So I'll talk about that. Then the art of the leave behind, and this comes from the graphic design world, where think of it kind of like a bona fide thank you note that you offer to your reviewers, a token of appreciation for their time, energy, and enthusiasm for your work and just traveling to go to these portfolio reviews, and a way for them to remember you and your work and the project that you might have shared. So I've got a fun exercise where I have created 5 different portfolio review leave behinds over the years, and I assess how effective they are in terms of opportunities that if they maybe help to foster, create time to create the object itself, and the expense. So we're going to get through that. We're talking about how to prepare for your first portfolio review and the art of the follow-up, which is essential to maximizing the outcomes that come from this experience, which you do pay to be a part of. So the big picture here, portfolio reviews are, I like to think, a microcosm of what goes on in the fine art photography world. There's a wide array of reviewers that you can connect with in person, also virtually, for a short amount of time. And I say short, most of them are about 20 minutes. And you could sit at a table in front of a gallery director who owns a gallery, a fine art gallery, selling artwork on commission, right? You could sit across the table with a photo editor at National Geographic, maybe get your work published. You could sit across the table with a consultant or a book publisher or a photo editor. You can sit across the table from a book agent. You never know, and it's all over the place. And essentially, the experience is, I will say, it can be a rather stressful experience, yet pressure is made under diamonds are made under pressure. And so this notion of you have 20 minutes to sit down at a table, and this is going to be more in person, share your work, ask questions. Maybe you're mid-project and you're looking for critical feedback. Maybe you have a completed project that's never been published or exhibited or shown before. And it can serve as a launching point for a lot of fine art photographers in their career. And for me, that's exactly what it did for me. So I'll share some personal experiences that have helped. There's lots of different portfolio reviews, and I'll share coming up here some different flavors, if you will, styles of portfolio reviews, which range from a 3-week long international in scope to a 2-day weekend adventure. And you get to decide what's right for you. So I wanted to start off with my very first portfolio review success story, I'll say, in 2015. And I went to Review Santa Fe, which was my first portfolio review. And there I am. I got my blazer on, trying to show my best. I had my portfolio in front of me. And this is during what's called a portfolio walk, where it's open to the public. It's free to attend. The public can see what the photographers are sharing, their artwork. And it's funny now when I look back at this photograph, there's actually a good friend. He's actually in the photograph, Lou Kruger. He's retired now, but he got his MFA in photography in 1976. That's 2 years before I was born. And he taught for so many years. And we just recently connected because he has great curriculum that he developed on how to teach pinhole photography. And I talked with him when I created my first pinhole photography workshop in January. And it was wonderful to say, gosh, that relationship started at Review Santa Fe, at a portfolio review in 2015. And here we are in 2023, so 8 years later. So the outcomes are the relationships that you build, connections you foster and make. Maybe you trade a couple prints. That's the big picture. That's the reason I love portfolio reviews, is because of the people. So I wanted to share a few success stories that I have witnessed personally among my peers. And I never forget DM Whitman. She was at PhotoFest, Houston PhotoFest, which is the largest portfolio review. And it attracts an international audience. It's 3 weeks long. You would sign up for a week block generally. And she was showing, I believe they were some prints that she had produced inspired by Anna Watkins. And they're of like botanics, beautiful, pristinely presented. And sitting across from her, this was after hours, believe it or not, was Ann Tucker and Malcolm Daniel. They are curators at the Museum of Fine Art in Houston, which collects photography. They are the first museum acquisition for photographers. And so to meet with them after hours was a privilege. And they decided right on the spot that they would acquire these prints that you see right in front of her. And she did not know what was going on. I'm just sitting there like cheering for her. I take a little picture. And that was her first museum acquisition, right? This kind of stamp of approval from this collecting institution that her work is worth being preserved for eternity, the object of the prints, right? And that's a goal for many photographers. As I was waiting in the line to get into a room, and this was the review room at Photolucida, portfolio review in Portland, Oregon, I met Karen Navarro, and we quickly exchanged cards, and we're a little bit nervous as we're walking in the room. And you could look at some of her work, and one of the outcomes was there was a gallerist by the name of Jeffrey Koslov at Photo Relevance in Houston, and he wrote this wonderful review of her work, kind of the latest, greatest stuff, the work that has inspired him going to this portfolio review as a reviewer. From that, she was able to exhibit work and now is represented by Photo Relevance in Houston, and has had a solo exhibition that I was privileged to witness firsthand, which I was really excited about. But that was a direct outcome to meeting gallerists via a portfolio review. Now, it wasn't just showing up. It was the 10,000 hours of overnight success that built the platform to have that opportunity presented. But to be able to witness that firsthand, knowing like, wow, that is completely possible, inspired me. And here's a little inspiration of her solo exhibition that was January to February 25th of this year, 2023, in Houston, Texas. Very contemporary photography, cutting edge, these mosaic work that is a visual expression of identity through her unique deconstruction and reconstructed portraits. And I've traded work with her. I have a couple of her pieces in my own personal collection. And so I wanted to share that first, that success story with you. I wanted to share also one of my success stories. This was rewind to 2017. This is Photo Lucida in Portland, Oregon. And I met the photo editor, the boss at National Geographic magazine in Washington, D.C., Sarah Lean. She was at the time the director of photography, and she fell in love with one of my projects called The Unchosen Ones, which featured the last place contestants at Minnesota County Fairs. And then I did a second portion of that project where I photographed the animals in their own home pasture. And you can see that work in front of, these are the actual prints that I showed in the actual portfolio review, literally before I knew that this was going to happen. This is actually the editing room at National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C. And you can see those exact same photographs there laid out, and they're making decisions as the edit sequence for what goes into the magazine. So that was a very exciting time in my life, a stamp of credibility as a photographer to get your work out to a global audience. And that was published in the November issue, 2017 of National Geographic. And you can see these are photographs that I created. I wasn't necessarily commissioned by National Geographic. They have this proof section, they call, where they will actually publish photographers' work that's already been completed. And that was a direct outcome from going to that particular portfolio review. So anything is possible, right? And that helped to kind of catapult my career to then help create the first book that was published. And then that's when my career kind of launched, I would say. And so it's possible. Now, you might ask yourself, well, which portfolio reviews do I choose? Because there's so many. And so I kind of did a little rundown here of the different portfolio reviews in the United States. Photo Fest is a biannual. So you'll see the little asterisk there. So that happens every other year. I believe the next iteration of Photo Fest will be in the fall or later in 2024. I don't know if they've announced the dates yet. Same thing for Photo Lucida. That's biannual as well. So I have a little question mark, like April 2024. So that's one of the things that you want to write in your calendar in months before, because they will do the calls for entry and then you have to pay. Some of them you have to submit. Filter was my most recent. I did that in September of 2023. And the next one I'm assuming will be 2024. Photo Nola, the most recent one, was December of 2023. So I would assume that they would do it the next one. That's in New Orleans, and that is usually in December. Review Santa Fe is a juried portfolio review, which means there's generally 3 jurors that will select the 100 photographers that will be allowed to be invited to attend and present their work. I will say I don't necessarily see a difference in terms of quality of the photographers I might meet of their work at portfolio reviews like PhotoFest or Photo Lucida versus Review Santa Fe. They're across the board. I think everyone's excited to be there. They're going to show their best work. Some of them, they may not be appropriate if this is their very first portfolio review. I think, for example, PhotoFest can be a little intimidating, where it's 4 days of reviews, you're meeting with 28 reviewers over time, versus like Filter, for example, is 2 days in Chicago. And that tends to be a lot of like recent graduates potentially, or people with their first projects that they're working on or recently completed. So it tends to be a less intimidating, higher pressure situation per se. Denver Month of Photography, they just had their reviews last March. So they're generally March. Medium Photography is in, they have a down in San Diego, California with Scott Davis. They have, I think, believe virtual reviews this year. Click Photo Fest was virtual in 2022. They're based in kind of the triangle, the Golden Triangle in Durham, Charlotte, kind of that in North Carolina. And then Photo Alliance is in San Francisco based. And I don't know if I don't think they had one this year, but maybe next year. So that kind of gives you a rundown of the reviews in the United States. There are also portfolio reviews outside of the United States. Key ones would be the Format portfolio reviews. I have participated in that, had a wonderful experience. I participated when they were virtual. And that opened a whole lot of doors in terms of just relationships across the pond, so to speak. So I didn't have to fly to London, then travel and lodging, and which just adds to jet lag, fatigue, expense, time, and energy. So that was nice, but I did have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to do my online review, which was had to be prepared and set the alarm at 2:30 to make sure I didn't oversleep, right? Arles, the south of France, that's generally really hot, but that's a great one. It's eat, drink, sleep photography for that time period in July. So I'm not sure if they're going to do it. So stay tuned for that, as well as Cortona on the Move is a festival in Italy in July as well. So those are three that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's more out there, but I wanted to kind of share a really wonderful resource that I found that was created by the Month of Photography in Denver. Samantha Johnson, I believe, was behind this, and she did a great job in terms of sharing advice for first-time photographers who are maybe preparing for their first portfolio review. So if you go to their website or Google Month of Photography Denver, click on the portfolio reviews section, and you will see some tips that I'm going to quickly go through on what to do before your review, during your review, and after your review. So the first is things to think about before the review. She has, things like setting your objectives. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Be very clear. I think it's important. The person sitting in front of you doesn't know your work necessarily. They don't know where you are in your career. So being realistic with goals. So if this is your first portfolio review, I wouldn't say it would be realistic to expect landing gallery representation with a blue chip New York gallery, right? Maybe you're just looking for feedback on which of the 10 images are the strongest, or out of 20 images I'm going to share, which 3 are the weakest, or something like that. They're helping to edit your portfolio down. I always say 17 is like the magic number. No matter in 20 minutes, there's generally room for about 17 images. And that gives the reviewer time to take their time looking at your work. I say, don't talk, have some quietness. They're visual, they're taking in all that, they're looking at the type of paper, how it's printed, the subject matter, the messages, the emotions, all of that. And then you want to have time for questions because you're there for feedback, hopefully. And you want to have time to ask them questions, right? What are they working on? What do you think? You want to practice your presentation because that 20 minutes goes really quickly, and you generally have to allot for 1 to 2 minutes for transition times as well. So it's not a true 20 minutes. It's more like 18 minutes, 17 and a half minutes if things are running on time. And there's the research on who are you meeting with, who is sitting across from you at the table. I think is important. It's not necessary. Sometimes people like to be surprised, and that's okay. However, if they just juried your work in a recent group show, it would be nice to say, hey, thank you for jurying my work in this group show. And then that might help jog their brain. Oh, I remember you. I love that image, right? That's a nice gatekeeper, kind of opener for that conversation. Also on their website, the Denver Month of Photography, they have some tips about things to do before the review. Taking notes, remembering why you're there, bring your business card potentially, ask them the best way that they prefer to stay in touch. And if they say email, then make sure in your follow-up to say, we met at the Denver Month of Photography reviews, right? I'm sure these reviewers receive hundreds of emails a day, so it helps them kind of jog their memory. Sometimes I will attach a single small photograph to help visually remember, oh yes, that's the person I met with, right? So those are some nice little tips, as well as after the review. And I'll talk about this coming up on things that you can do to kind of reflect on the experience. And, if they recommend, oh, you should look at this photographer's work who reminds me of your work, or has a good visual conversation, your work versus their work, or would hang nicely in an exhibition next to this work, or has done something very similar to this work. You might want to explore that. Now, as you're selecting your first portfolio review, you might want to ask yourself questions like, you're paying a lot of money to sit in front of these people. So how do you select these people? So I have a little demo I've prepared. We're actually going to go literally a live demo. So I'm going to escape out of my presentation, and I'm going to go right to a website here. This is the Review Santa Fe's website, visitcenter.org. And they have on their website a list of the Review Santa Fe. It's a little bit about the portfolio review. I believe, let's see here, if we click here, I think this is going to be in November 16th through 19th of 2023. So it's coming up. I believe the application guidelines are all specified here. There's the reviewers. So if you want to see past reviewers, but let's say you were thinking about, and I might even think that the deadline might have already passed. So let's maybe just look at the schedule. So this is kind of what you have to look at. That's the 2022. So that doesn't really help me identify what's coming up for next year. So these are things that you want to be considered. The program takes place. I know there's maybe guidelines, maybe click here. So it looks like the deadline was March 15th, the final March 9th. So it was a couple weeks ago. So that's okay, because for the sake of this process, I'm going to pretend like I already applied. And now I'm going to walk you through things that I might be thinking about. So the first thing is I want to know the nuts and the bolts. Okay, when is it? Am I available, right? Does that conflict with another trip that I've already planned or a commitment? The next thing I would look at is potentially the costs involved. I flying into Santa Fe is really expensive. Generally, you fly into Albuquerque, and then you rent a car, and then there's hotel, and so maybe the review is $1,200. They don't really tell that here. There's an application fee. So if you're a member, it's $55. There's a lot to kind of take in, I would say. But in general, it's about like $1,200 to $1,300, right? And that's just to enter the reviews. Then there's generally lodging, which I would say is $250 a night. So if you're there for 3 or 4 nights, there's $1,000. There's your food. There's your rental car. There's your fuel. There's your taxes. So we'll call it a spitball $3,000 minimum for this kind of investment in your potential of your career. So that's something to think about. The next thing is the reviewers. This is really what you're paying for. Yeah, yes, there's exhibitions that are on time, but if you're going to a portfolio review, I feel like your focus really should be on, connecting with quality people that you may not be able to normally get in front of. So there's generally categories here, exhibiting and collecting categories. So there's both nonprofit and commercial galleries. And I would say, oh, okay, yeah, I review with this person. I don't maybe need to review with this person. Oh, this is a new gallery I've never heard of. Okay, maybe I should, this is a new person. Maybe that's one person on my list. Great, this is a second gallery, if that's what I'm going after. So I'm kind of quickly looking through and I'm doing some mental calculations in my head. Okay, I might meet with 2 of these people, museum curators. Oh, there's this exciting new people. Oh, I met with this person already. Well, I know this person's not interested in my work. I'm just giving some examples, okay? I've already met with this person. I know this person. Oh my gosh, I would love to meet with this person, right? So you kind of come up with these lists of, okay, now we're up to maybe 6 people. I'm publishing, well, I'm not really maybe at the right point in publishing a book. So maybe I'm going to hold off for a moment, okay? So I'm going to skip the publishing world, for example. Editorial, oh, I'm not really an editorial photographer, but I might want to get my work published in Analog Forever. And I know great things about Michael Kirchhoff. I personally have been published with him and love working with him. I've been working with The Guardian. They feature work with a huge audience. Okay, there's 2 more people minimum. Oh, wow, someone from National Geographic will be there too. That could be an interesting thing, right? So you build your list. Okay, maybe I have 8 people. And then you look at your budget. Okay, I'm spending $3,000 to meet with 8 people. Okay, wow, that's $500 for a 20-minute visit with a potential meeting with this person. You have to kind of assess, like, is that worth it for you? And you get to decide, right? So that's just kind of what I often walk through. The difference between meeting with 8 people versus 12 versus 16 versus maybe there's additional people I can meet with outside of the formal reviews, maybe make it 20. Then that cost per review, and this is more of kind of a financial way of looking at things, then the costs drop. If you're just wanting to have a great time, hang out with your friends, well, then it's hard to commodify that. And that's definitely a first world concern. I come from it from a very pragmatic financial standpoint that every penny I earn selling my art, I want to be very careful about how I invest that for future projects. And I look at this as a marketing endeavor, okay? So I'm going to go back here to my presentation, and that gives you a little bit of an idea of what I think about. Now, I mentioned this notion of 17, and 17 to me is the magic number of, in 20 minutes, the amount of prints one can kind of absorb, look at again, and then have a little conversation about. So if you're going to show up with 40, 50 prints to a portfolio review, I would say really whittle it down to your best images. I love this notion of power dotting. And this helps you to identify which of those images in your portfolio are going to be in maybe that 17 or 20 or 22 images that you bring. And so I will generally get some friends that I trust that are in my creative circle, and I lay out some small prints. These are 8x12s. My portfolio might be normally 20x24. So they're smaller prints. And I say, choose your favorites. Put a little piece of paper on top of your favorites, and I'll go around. And what's interesting is the ones that are often my favorite are not often the ones that are their favorite. So it's interesting to see those images that reveal themselves as being maybe stronger than I originally thought, or help with a broader edit sequence for a project and kind of carry a project. There's one thing about having one strong image versus if you can tell a story with 10 images that's very visually engaging. That's a different skill set. And that's where I feel like having a photo editor to help you kind of tell that visual story is really important. So that exercise, power dotting, I find valuable. Bring over, maybe not your mom, maybe you have some trusted colleagues, maybe another art professor if you're a photo teacher, maybe a collector, maybe a couple other photographers. Offer to do maybe a wine and cheese night and just have a social gathering. And then, hey, I'm working on this new project. I would love some feedback. I've got 25 images. I need to whittle down to 15 or 17. Help me. And so that's kind of a nice experience. And take a picture after you finish your power dotting exercise, and that will serve as a visual record. Consider also in your portfolio review using what's called a contact sheet. Now, a contact sheet goes back to the days of film photography, where before you would really print something from a 35 millimeter negative, you would create a contact sheet which has all the negatives displayed, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio replication that allows you to just view 36 images if you're shooting a roll of 36, for example, all at once. And then you can kind of go in there with your grease marker and select the ones that are the standouts. And you have your loop and you go in and you are they in focus, right? Now in Lightroom or Capture One, which is what I use, there's different modules that allow you to view images more that kind of form. But in a portfolio review, oftentimes it's really nice that you can start or end with what this looks like as a contact sheet that shows you, okay, I have 20 images or 12 images. Here's their names. This is from my project called The Unchosen Ones. And you can see, for example, that there's 4 horizontal portraits, and then there's 6 diptychs that, or excuse me, 8 diptychs, so 4 sets of 2 that are created 4 years apart. So it's the same youth, the same animal, but 4 years apart. So you see that growth from defeat, how the animal has changed, how the attitude of the kid has potentially changed, how the surroundings might be a little different. And then the reviewer has a really firm sense of what this project is about. So I think this is a custom portfolio that I designed and built by hand using this denim book cloth. I called The Unchosen Ones. This is, you can see it silver or foil stamped on the cover there, and you open that up and there's several different components. There's a completed monograph. There's a accordion book which has actually QR codes which link to video documentary that I produced, as well as a portfolio of a dozen prints. And then there's the contact sheet, we'll call it, the thumbnails, if you will. That was the word that was going through my mind. That allows, again, the viewer, maybe before they jump in, that they know what they're going to see. So it's like a little teaser, an amuse-bouche, if you're a foodie. And so you can see that the folio opens up. Now, this is available for acquisition. I produce these in an edition of 12, 5,500 is the current price for number 2 of 12. It features 10 prints that I select and 2 that the user, the collector, selects. And you can kind of get a sense a little bit of what the work is about. There's a handmade bespokeness that comes from integrating both a completed monograph that's special edition with a different cover than maybe the trade edition, as well as a lot of bespoke artist editions, we'll call it, with the clamshell box, the tipped in cover with the images on the front and the back of the book that are tipped in, and the accordion book. And these are kind of drawing on the rich tradition in the book arts practice, of which, being a photographer, I feel a part of. Now, I wanted to share, this was my first portfolio. So you don't have to go all fancy, right? This is like my first one. This was Rewind 2015. And I chose a 20 by 24 inch portfolio case, which fit, I could carry it on the airplane, and I didn't have to check it in my luggage, which was really stressful. You don't want to check your portfolio case, right? You want to be able to carry it on, put it overhead. But you'll notice that the bottom is weighted thicker than the top and the sides. And that's because when you're sitting at a 6 to 8 foot table and you're sitting down on the portfolio cases there, visually at an angle, you can view the whole image without the clamshell box obstructing the angle of view. So that's what I did. So I would say, if this is your first time or maybe second project, whatever you do for your edition prints, they're small size, use that in your portfolio when you show the work so that you're not having to print a lot of extra prints outside of your edition that cost money, that can't be sold. And then if you're meeting with a gallery, they see the scale, the quality, the paper type of the actual object that they would theoretically be selling if they chose to represent you. So that's my little tip and trick. The portfolio case I bought were vertical, and then I cut it in half and then used gaffer tape and then kind of MacGyvered it so that it opens horizontal. And that worked great when you're sitting on an 8 foot table. And then you don't have to rotate things and stuff like that. And you can slide the prints across, right? So that's what I did. You can choose what works for you. Now, couple little tip. This is an RJ endorsed tip. is I would say when you've given your name badge and you usually wear a lanyard around your neck, I see so many people that get distracted and they see a friend or they forget who they're meeting with and they miss a review. So I would say on the back of your name badge, write your reviewer schedule, right? So you know exactly when your reviews are, because if you're having 4 days of reviews, you might have a 9:30, a 10:15, and your next one might not be until 1, but you could easily forget about your 1. So I would say that's my big tip, because you don't want to forget about that person that you're meeting with. Now, networking at these events, I find to be really important. And no one loves this notion of networking. It feels very kind of artificial, and people just want to be genuine. And that's in essence what you're meeting other photographers and people that are in your same boat. You're sharing projects, you're passionate about photography, you've spent a lot of time producing your projects, you're hopefully proud of your work. And so you've got like 5 or 6 common denominators to connect with. And these are what I like to think of the backbone experiences of going to portfolio reviews, or building your inner circle, the people that you can call when you're concerned about something, or, hey, should I enter this juried show? Or how do you package a print? Or, should I enter this juried exhibition? Or did you have a good experience working with that New York gallery? Did they treat you well? Did they pay you on time? Did they return a print that shouldn't have? Or something like that, right? So these are just some over the years, some people I've connected with, and I called your friends, and we talk not just about business. And so that's something to be thinking about as you are planning your portfolio review experience. Now, portfolio walks are a wonderful way to engage with the public. That might also be collectors. They could be outside reviewers, or reviewers that just maybe you didn't have a chance to see during the formal reviews. And Photo NOLA, this is what their portfolio walk looked like. They do something very interesting where you lay out your work, and then everyone leaves the room, and only the reviewers will go in just for a small amount of period of time, and they can just like look through it in quiet. And then the public is invited with the photographers to answer questions. And then it becomes this party almost, like it's loud, you're crammed in there, right? But different portfolio walks are different. You generally have a 4-foot section of space. So you have to be thinking like, how do I want to present my prints, my business cards? Do I want them just hodgepodge laid over? Do I want them in a box or an easel? So these are all conscious decisions that you'll need to make when you're investing in this opportunity. I brought this project called The Best of the Best, which featured salt prints from Supreme Champion exemplars at one of the most competitive fairs in the country. So these are salt over archival pigment prints. And I created an accordion artist book. So I brought not only the artist book, but you can see here on the left my leave behind. Other portfolio walks, like here at Photo Lucida at the Portland Art Museum, can be very congested, and sometimes they'll be in hour blocks. This is what I look like at Houston Photo Fest. This was in 2020, literally just before lockdown, but I've got generally a portfolio. I have maybe a completed monograph. I will actually sell work. I have a pricing list there. I have my Square reader that I can swipe a credit card for. So I want to give you this little video here to show you what it feels like, what it looks like. What a whirlwind. Now, one of my favorite things, and here's my buddy Eric Koonsman here with Petra Baruth, and got friends hanging out after hours. And this is one of my favorite things where we can review each other's work. It feels like grad school if you're an MFA program. I never went to a grad school in MFA, so this is where I love to get feedback and see other work and see how they printed it, and just ask them questions. And honestly, this is my favorite thing about portfolio reviews. And oftentimes, especially after the reviews, we'll trade prints and such. Okay. Now, this is the first time that I publicly shared this little exercise with you, so I'm very excited. So I think it's really important to create memorable leave behinds. And I want to give a couple examples here to show you what maybe others have done, and then I will show you what I have done. So my buddy JP Terlizzi, he's in New York. We joke we have the creative leave behind Olympics, and he's represented by Photo Relevance in Houston, Texas, and he has created these very bespoke leave behinds with wax stamps and handmade books with accordions. And he actually, I believe, created these and then actually sold some of them after the review was canceled. This was during the pandemic. So this was in my personal collection. So I'm really excited to see the time and thought and energy that goes into creating something very special. You'll see he signed it. He has the title of the project, his name, his email, his website. He has the title of the piece. I think he might have done like 13 of these pieces, and then the reviewers were given one from the series. So very bespoke, but then he did these little blood samples where he literally pricked his blood and put like a specimen as part of the artist practice, decisions he have. So he has your own blood, your own DNA is in your portfolio leave behind. So some of us sweat and have tears. He literally had blood, sweat, and tears. And then you can see how that work looks like in the object that actually is hanging right behind me. This is one of his photographs framed here. And you'll see how the leave behind kind of matches what the final art object looks like, which I feel like is a very intentional way of presenting your work. It makes it memorable. Here's a second series he did called The Good Dishes, where he again did these little accordion fold outs. Look at the little tiny fork and spoon with the wax stamp. And he did these series with food and its interplay with memory and nostalgia using these patterns of dishware. And it's, of course, drawing on some of his family history. So I thought that was a very creative use of these leave behinds. Now I've created here this little, my own, we'll call it portfolio review Olympics that you'll be a part of. And I've given 6 different examples of leave behinds that I've created from 2015 to 2022. So what I want to show you is all of the leave behinds that I've created, and I'll walk through each one. I'll share a little bit about like time and energy and cost, and then more importantly, how effective they were. Okay, so I'm going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 6. The first component I want to think about is the amount of time it took to create. This is generally something that I'm doing late on a Friday night or Saturday night outside of normal business hours. So I think it's really important to be mindful, like, God, these are going to take 40, 50 hours. That's an entire week of work, right? For a gift that you're giving someone that you're paying $400 to meet with, right? So you have to be very strategic, right? So time, value, the cost of goods to produce these, as well as what I call the relative effectiveness. Okay, so here we go. You're going to want to sit down for this because I'm pretty excited. All right, so the first one is what I call the bound mini folio. So it's a small folio. And what I did was print off on the same paper that I produced my prints. So you'll see those prints on the wall. Those are the actual prints. And then you'll see the leave behind prints on the table. And I bound them. I did 2 sets. So the reviewers would have different sets, right? And it kind of gives a bespokeness. So the first one had 5 images. They had more like brown tones. The second one had more like green tones. And so you can see the starting page, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth page, and then the last page, which is like my name with my information, website, email, that sort of thing, right? And then I bound them together with these brass tacks. I literally did a screwdriver, mechanical screwdriver, drilled 2 holes, put the brass tacks so that they were bound. And so that kind of felt like a booklet, like kind of an artist book, but it was very bespoke. And I don't think people wanted to throw it away. So that was a nice thing. I did try to sell these at the portfolio walk. I did provide a value. So a pack of 5 was $80. I don't think I sold any of them. However, it did create the sense of like, oh, those have value. And the portfolio reviewers talk too. They're like, ooh, they see what's on someone else's table. That's really sexy, right? So that's just something to build up your brand, if you will. The second one I did was a felt pouch that matched the collector's edition that I produced with fiber samples from animals. So the first sheep and the first goat that I photographed on American soil for my project, as well as postcards. So I'll show you what that looked like. This is the collector's edition of my first monograph, which I think I still have 3 left. It's in 6 major museum collections. It includes the monograph, the National Geographic, their skin fell, which is like this wood fell stamping. The sheep are on the right, the goats on the left. That kind of sticks with the theme of the book. But then there are these smaller versions. So the smaller version is literally what the postcards I created were, where I did the lock of the animal with a business card. I did several prints in this little case. And that worked really well. I'll give you a little secret. That's a laptop case I got on Amazon that I completely retrofitted. And that was the mouse case that it came with. So like, it didn't cost me anything. I didn't want to throw it away. So like, be creative with your leave behinds. And then these little postcards, I think, were from Moo. So they open it, it's bespoke, it's consistent branding wise. They've got this, I think they could feel something, they've got your information, obviously, but it's more than a postcard, right? So it gives you some different angles. Here's kind of what my business card looked like. There's a lock of the first goat that was on the cover of the book. So that was another example. The third is a salt print. So I produced these by hand in my dim room in the basement, and I made a folio, embossed, gold stamped. I handmade these. These took a lot of time. This was kind of like my COVID lockdown project. And they had some text panels on the top with the actual salt print from the Minnesota State Fair commemorative artwork in 2019 on the bottom. Most people have never seen a salt print. What was cool about the folio is that you open it and you tie the back, and then it serves as like a little tripod and it stands upright. So you can display the print without a frame, which I thought was kind of cool. That's what it looks like there. So it's a nice little gift. It's not this burden that you're like giving someone, now you got to figure out how to frame it or whatever, right? So that's kind of what I meant, is like being very engaging. Of course, it has lavender oil and white beeswax, which draws on this rich tradition of preserving historic processes prints. So this is Audrey Sands, the curator of photography at the Center of Creative Photography in Arizona State University. And she's smelling literally the leave behind at the review table at PhotoFest. And so I thought that was pretty exciting. I've done these for collectors and gallerists, and they love it. So that's the third one I've done. The next is just a basic folio with 5 different prints. And so I've handmade these like denim folios where you open them up. There's a little ribbon attached with 5 test prints inside, and generally a postcard that I've written on. And then the 5th is a PDF that has been really well designed by a graphic designer. And it's accordion fold, and I call it a prospectus, and this is what it looks like. And these cost me, granted, I had to hire a graphic designer and get them professionally printed and folded and then shipped to me. So those all have those costs. But this was nice because it featured 3 different projects that were completed, full artist statements. It featured installation views. It had some work samples with titles. And then it had curatorial statements as well. So for example, Corey Keller, who was the curator of photography at SF MoMA, endorsed this project like the Curator's Choice Award and Santa Fe, Review Santa Fe, and at the Center Awards in 2017 817. So I used her little statement there. This is good marketing. So front and back, that's what they look like. Full bio, kind of an image, right? And then the last is kind of, I would think the most common. These are the exhibition postcards. And so like I had a show, I didn't have to pay for this. They gave me 200 extras and I have them in my inventory and I'm going to hand them to someone, right? So the front is generally an image, the back is the gallery details. So what I'm going to quickly do for you is run down and show you which leave behind. I've walked through all 6, and then we're going to rate them on how effective they were. So the first one is the time. Okay, so 1 is the most amount of time, 1 star, so not good, right? Don't want to eat at a 1-star restaurant if you're in New York, right? 6 stars is like, no, mess that up. Mess that up. 1 is more time. It took more time to make. 6 is less time. So the postcard was the easiest. That gets a 6-star. The prospectus is 5. The 1 star is the one that took the most time to make. Okay. So that's how I kind of rated it on the star system for time, right? Then there's the cost. Okay. So notice number 3 was the value, the perceived value. It took the most time, but had the greatest perceived value, right? So that doesn't always equate to a winner per se, because there's number 6 that was the quickest to produce, but it's like a postcard. And you go to a lot of portfolio reviews, you'll be surprised at the amount of leave behinds that are left in the trash cans at the hotel, right? By the portfolio reviewers. So you don't want to do all this work, invest in this experience, and then it gets chucked in the trash can, right? So that's kind of a ranking to me in terms of the value. Now here's the cost of goods. This is how much it cost me to go out to Joann Fabrics. I'm pretty popular there. And buy the stuff to then make the thing, to give the thing away for free that I'm paying to give this person this thing, right? So just thinking about this, right? So of course the postcard is the cheapest, the least expensive. The prospectus, number 5, was actually the most expensive. Salt prints are pretty easy to produce, so that was a number 3. So you can kind of see them rank there. Most people think that just the salt print's really expensive, and it's actually it's not that bad. It's more time, right? So you kind of balance the time and energy. And then there's the relative effectiveness, right? So how effective were these at doing their job and like being memorable, right? The postcard number 6, again, this is typical, like, hey, maybe someone keeps it, maybe someone throws it away, versus like number 3 or number 4 or 5, like, oh, wow, this is really bespoke. Like, I would feel bad throwing this away. So that psychology as a reviewer, if you receive this as a gift, I think it's important to be cognizant of that. All right, here comes the fun part. This is the winner. So here's the leave behind. We kind of need a proper drum roll, turn around, see what happens. Here we go. All right, so if we add up all the stars, 12, 16, 16, 11, 12, 14. And then the results are, in first place, there's actually a tie between the folio, the felt folio, and the best of the best. Second place was the postcard, believe it or not. Third place was a tie as well between the prospectus and the accordion book. So I did not expect that. I didn't actually expect the tie to come through, and that the postcard would actually get second in the results. But wait, this is the cool thing. You ready for this? You're all sitting down. Okay, we're good. All right. Is that you can take one and you can give a second portfolio review, and then winner, chicken dinner. So you can actually combine your reviews. So if you have a salt print with a prospectus, then you're like, whoa, that was really cool, right? So that's just something to think about, is that you can maybe produce more than one and give it to them. Okay. So that's extra credit. is if you have a book, and I did this was at Filter in Chicago last fall, and I met with Karen Haas, who is the curator of the Lane curator for photographs at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And she had reviewed my work early on in the project, and I think it was year 4 that we reconnected. And so I was excited to share with her the completed project. And so during the review session, I presented the book, and she appreciated it. She accepted it. She's like, yeah, I'll donate it to the library. And that was a wonderful outcome, right? It's same as Alexa Dilworth at the Center for Duke Center for Documentary Studies in North Carolina. Again, this was at the same portfolio review at Filter, where I had done the work. I brought the books. Here was someone who was already familiar with my work, which was key. You don't want to just produce a book and give them away for free, because they have value. Right? They're the most expensive business card you'll ever have. You'll spend $100 to sell a $50 book. And that's going to be my next talk, which we'll talk about coming up in April. So stay tuned to that. So just something to think about. Now, my favorite question as we're kind of wrapping up here is, what do you want to ask? Is, might you know of any audiences you feel would resonate with my work? I feel like it takes the pressure off the reviewer to say yes, and then they know and they can draw from their colleagues of projects that they're maybe working on that won't debut for another 2 years. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask during portfolio reviews. Okay, so after you've invested this time, energy into your experience, I say definitely reflect on your time, take lots of notes. I think that's really important. Give recommendations for follow-up. I would say, like, if they give you recommendations during the reviews, follow up, do what they say, right? And I have this little cartoon that I made here. If you don't follow up, all you will hear are crickets chirping, right? So don't do that. Make sure you follow up. I know it's the least sexiest thing in the whole process, but that's really, really important, okay? Shoot me an email. I have a free PDF workshop a worksheet that will help you with some things that I found to be valuable in terms of networking at these portfolio reviews. So my email is rj@rjkern.com. Open the conversation between you and I. I welcome that. This is what it looks like. I'm going to quickly go through it. But it's basically kind of a little work on how you can share your network, expand your network, kind of how you can share maybe written knowledge that you've been inspired by, and then give you some thoughts for how you can improve opportunities for deeper connections. So email me, rj@rjkern.com. I will send you that little PDF, and then we'll get to be friends. Okay. So at this point, I am officially done. We're at the 58-minute mark, which is great. And I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So I'm going to quickly look in the Q&A here. Looks like someone asked, what's the best way to start? Is to start, right? Jump in that cold water and do it. Don't dilly-dally, because years will pass you by and you'll look back with regret. Someone asked, in addition to a business card, have you found it important, positive to have your business stationery? I don't know, business stationery, like in a thank you note, I think maybe. It has your name on it, like fancy or letterpressed, potentially. I think a postcard works. I mean, most of that correspondence goes in the trash anyway. But I think a good business card is important. Were these the leave behinds Amy asked given to each reviewer? Not all reviewers. I felt like if there's a couple of reviewers that we didn't connect and that just stayed in the back, I'm like, I'm not gonna, like, if they're rude or unprofessional, if they completely did not like the project and could not articulate as to why or give some recommendations on how I could improve it, they're on my they're not my favorites. So I'm like, I'm not going to give you something, right? This is a relationship. And if you can kind of feel that early on, I'm like, okay, maybe you're grinding an axe on something that I don't know about, but I try to treat everyone with love. And so then I don't often give those, but most, I would say 90% of the people I meet with, they're there, they're not being paid. I appreciate their time. And so that's what I do. Do you know who would be reviewing your work, or was it random? No, you sign up. Generally, you will find out before the reviews start. Now, I did have a good friend that was, a couple friends that were scarred at a review where their system was down and they found out 30 minutes before the review start who they were reviewing with. That was not cool. I like to know, like, kind of like a week before the reviews, like who I'm reviewing with, so I can really spend the time to research them. And I definitely don't like little curveballs. I've had a couple times where someone's been sick. I totally understand it. And then someone's in the hot seat and I have no idea who this person is. And you just kind of roll with it, right? There's nothing you can do for that. Let's see here. Another person asked, these leave behinds are such applicable in other places, mailed or shipped. You could certainly mail or ship them. They cost more. And I certainly will, especially on the book, I will often offer to ship them because I know with their luggage, that weight is valuable. But postcards generally don't take up too much, but I will certainly be happy to ship them if they want. I will take that burden on so that the value is passed off when they get back to their office. Another question, how do we make a leave behind for an online review? I think a PDF is fine, get their mailing address. I think one of the hard things with online reviews is that they're not actually seeing actual artwork. They're not shaking hands. And you have to press the flesh. You have to, there's a community, I think a really important human connection that comes with being in person, seeing actual artwork, especially the printing decisions. You know, looking at something as an image is one thing, then seeing the actual print can look very different. And so if it speaks to your artist practice to sell prints, that could be important to you. But I think reviewers are inundated by email. You know, I know personally, I like to receive something in the mail, so that's kind of nice. Last question, I think here is, did you find it positive to connect with a mentor or coach? To be honest, I mean, I have friends and colleagues. I have my little inner circle, and I ask if I'm not sure about something. I think that your gut will never lead you astray. I think it's important to listen to your instincts. I think that's important. But know that we often, as creatives, operate in a vacuum, and our practice can't often just exist there. It's important to go outside your sphere of influence and learn and see, and not just do the same thing over and over. So I think we might have answered all our questions. I think we're doing pretty good. And let me just check the chat here. Let's see here. Someone said, Amy asked, is the Griffin Museum of Photography has reviews in May? Is that a good one? I've never been. I love the Griffin. How much is it? Who are the reviewers? What's your time? Do you have to travel? The important thing, and this goes with all portfolio reviews, is you want to know that the person sitting across from you at the table has opportunities. I think if the person sitting across from you is there to make money off of you, I would challenge what that opportunity is, because you're paying money to be there, right? And it's one thing if it's a small nonprofit museum will put you in a group exhibition where you have to pay for the shipping, the production of the artwork, and the return shipping, plus the entrance fee. You're like, ooh, that's a lot of money, right? For a line item on my CV. That's not sustainable, right? So you have to make those decisions about what is sustainable for your creative practice. I think we are good to go. Thank you for the thumbs up, the smiley faces. Hope this was wonderful. Again, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, B&H, for the support, and SanDisk, Western Digital, and we'll see you in April for the final one. I will talk all about books and raising money and publishing of books and self-edition books and all that good stuff. Awesome. All right. Signing off.